They will all be made available offline so that you can review them, share them, and if you can't make a session that you thought you could, we'll have that link available for you to see that. The overall goal of the Aeros Vision Power Hours is to give you and your users the skills to create basic queries, reports, and dashboards against the Aeros ERP database. That is the beginnings of it. There are many levels of creating queries and reports and dashboards, and you can get very advanced with the different functions and functionality. The first 6 sessions here are about the basics of the system. So for those of you that have had some past experience with Aeros Vision, a lot of this will be review as we go over the next couple of weeks, and we will keep expanding on that over time and giving you more advanced functionality on how to do it. The model that we'll be using for this entire system for all the demos and the training will be against the Aeros ERP database. Now, for some of those that aren't using Aeros ERP or going to be using it in the future or want to connect it to some other system or other database, you can. Just reach out to me and I can show you how we can connect it to any other database that you have out there that is a function of the system, even though I'm just going to be using Aeros ERP as the sample that I'll be going through the next 6 weeks on this. So this is just a preview of the schedule, or you should have this in your email for those of you that had the actual email from me. You can follow up if you need the links to register for these ones. As today, we're going over the overview of Vision. Next, on October 23rd, we'll be doing more details on queries, how to create a query out of the system, how to create a grid. That'll be a very beginner lesson in terms of selecting your fields and going from there. Next, we'll do the same thing with reports, actually creating reports out of the system. And using the query that we created on October 23rd, we'll expand that to actually creating a report against that query. Then we'll create some dashboards that look all fancy and show you sales information and charts and grids and that kind of information. A little bit more advanced because it requires that visual aspect to the system. December 4th, we'll talk about groovy grids. This is a much more expanded functionality of the queries. October 23rd, it's kind of taking up into the intermediate level there to more than just a query, but adding drill down functionalities and conditional formatting and much more expansions of the different grids. On December 18th, we'll be wrapping up this session with showing you Aeros Vision for the web, a new product that we're finishing up right now in development that will be able to get everything that I'm showing you on the running side of reports and queries and dashboards and putting it up on the web. So your mobile users, give them access to your web server from remote. You can give them access to the data they need to. And so we'll be showing you that on December 18th. Once again, I'm telling you ahead in advance, it's a little bit salesy on that aspect just so it's more high-level stuff. So with that said, what is Aeros Vision? Let's dig into the meat of what we're going to be showing over the next several weeks. Aeros Vision is really comprised of several different main functions. One of them is writing queries and producing grids. In this screenshot here, we have an example, and I'll show you this exact one here in just a few minutes, the item sales history. The item sales history grid here is just a grid that I created that says, hey, let's show an item, let's show its description, let's show the customer I sold it to, the data I sold it to, how much and what quantity for. And I wrote a query out of the system very easily, and I'll show you that process, that produces this final grid. This is the end result of producing a grid. You can do filtering, you can do grouping, you can do all kinds of fun stuff on this here. The next level that Aeros Vision does is actually able to produce a report. So this is a report, a sample report that I created here. Just shows an invoice listing by customer. Here's my customer and the different invoices that I have going against them with their amount and balance. The difference I want to show you between the queries and the grid layout here versus a report. A grid layout is intended to show that data on the screen and be able to manipulate it in the aspect of changing the way that you view the data. You can see on this example right here, I have 44,000 rows of data. Now, that is not something you would actually want to print out unless you like wasting all those trees. But it isn't necessary. This is if you just want to go in and inquire on something. You want to dig in here and say, you know, this is my item, this is my product, and this is what I want to see. But you don't actually need to print it. I've been finding that a lot of our customers, when I've implemented Aeros Vision and writing different reports and visions, their default is, hey, Keith, will you write a report for me that does this? And when I really dig into it, all that we really need is a grid. We don't need a full-blown report that you're going to print out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. You just need a better way to inquire and look at the information on the screen. So this is probably, in my eyes, the most powerful part of Aeros Vision is actually producing the grids and putting the data on the screen. Now, it does have a button up here so you can print, and so if you want to print all 44,000 lines of this, you sure can. And we'll cover that in a little bit more detail also. So we have the grids, and then we have the reports. Reports, the data that shows up on a report is based upon the exact data that you have to do on a grid first. So you always have to create a grid first with your raw data. You might not need to do anything fancy with it, but if it's something that you want to actually do your layout and do a report design, that's when you go into the process of actually creating a report and dragging fields. For those of you that have some past reporting experience, this might look somewhat familiar to Crystal reports and actually dragging fields onto the screen so you can lay it out and do bold and summaries and groupings and stuff like that. The next function of Aeros Vision is creating and viewing dashboards. So here's a sample dashboard. We've all heard that word dashboard over the many years. If I just want to log in and see, you know, maybe this little chart right here of revenue over a time period so I can see where it's going, revenue by my type of product, and pie charts and graphs, and then grid information down the bottom. And that's what the dashboard function allows you to do. It allows you here to create as many different grids on a screen or different charts or pie graphs, and it uses all the same exact information that we created with our different grids back from the very beginning. So we can create these pretty diagrams, and somebody wants to log in, you can create this for your manager so they can log in the morning, say, hey, go to that dashboard, click the button, and boom, the dashboard pulls up, and they can see all the information that they need to. The final function that we have of Aeros Vision is a very new process, and it's still in a bit of development as we work with different clients to figure out really what functions and features we need to use to make this work best for them. But this is generating customized financial reports. And we'll dig into a little bit more on what we see on the screen here, but you can create an unlimited different layout and customize the way that you like to see your financials. In the ERP system, we know that it only has limited financials in there in terms of the canned ones that our developers and analysts sat there and said, this is how financial statements should look. But we all know every single one of you out there has a different need for your financial statement than the next customer. So that's what the financials function of Aeros Vision allows us to do, is to create different layouts and different columns and lines that you like to see that make sense to you. For example, this one we're seeing on the screen here is a 12-month trend of different lines that they have on the account. So you can see that information there. If you don't need to see a 12-month trend, create a different one where it's this month or last month and whatnot. So those are the four main functions: financials, dashboards, reports, and queries. And so now we are ready to jump in and actually take a look at Aeros Vision and see that these options in the works. So this is the main Aeros Vision screen. So when you launch Aeros Vision, you will see a screen that looks very similar to this. We see here three of those four main functions that I talked about. One, we have queries here. So here's the list of the different queries and a button to create new queries. Here's the reports that we've written, and then here's the dashboards that we've written. Now, with any one of these, I can easily click the button here, for example, and I want to run this item sales history query. I can hit the button, the little blue play button, and boom, up comes the grid. I can do the same thing for a report. I can run this invoice listing by customer option. Some of the options and queries and reports that you have can give you different conditions, and you can ask the system or tell the system, hey, whenever I run this, I want to be asked different parameters for running this report or running this different query. And this is just an example screen here. I can set these different options and say, hey, I only want to run invoices where the balance amount is not equal to 0. And I click the OK button, and now up here in a second will come the report. Why did it want to open down there? I don't know. And so there's a sample of a report. And doing the same thing, I can hit the little play button right here over next to revenue analysis, for example, and this will show that same exact dashboard screen that was on the previous presentation, but there's our dashboard. And so very easily, your users can just come right into Aeros Vision, select whatever it is they want to run, either a query, a report, or a dashboard, and hit the little play button and display that information in just a few clicks. Now, for those that are using the Aeros ERP application, we do have functionality that we can publish this report to Aeros ERP or this query or this dashboard. I can hit this little button here, publish it to Aeros ERP, and it will directly integrate it into the Aeros ERP menu. So the end user doesn't need to come actually into this screen right here and select the report. It can be added directly to the navigation of the system. And for those of you that are working with Aeros ERP, I will follow up with you if you have questions on implementation and how we make that work for you. So let's dig into actually running a query and what the different options that we have here are. So I'm going to pick this query that I have here, the item sales history, for example. I'm going to hit the little play button right here. And so up comes this grid. This is the end result of creating a query. And I'll show you exactly how we create a query just as I show you after I finish showing you what the end result is here. But this grid here is what the end user actually sees at the end of the day. This is where the end powerful aspect of your day-to-day process is after you've actually written the query. On these grids, we have a couple standard different features that allows you to do all kinds of things to filter and group and sort your data as needed. One thing we can do, for example, is if I pull up this screen here, we got 44,000 rows. Now, I can't think of anybody that really sits there and says, I need to look at every single one of those 44,000 rows every time I do this. So what this grid allows you to do is to filter the information up here. On the very top line up here, we have what's called an auto filter row. I can come here, for example, and I can say the description I want to narrow down by my drumstick products, and I can type drumstick. Excuse me, and it filters down, and now we have only 1,400 rows down here. I can continue filtering, say I only want to see my drumsticks sold to Albertsons, and now it narrows it down even further. I can see 87 rows there instead. And you can do all those kinds of different filtering with all of these different columns up here in order to see what is relevant to you at that time. Now, this is just one of the ways to filter this information. If you recall a few minutes ago when I was running the invoice listing report, or if I run this invoice listing grid option right here, I get these parameters, and this is just a different way to do it. And when we actually go into the training next week of actually creating your first query, I'll show you the difference and the benefits of actually having your parameters here as opposed to within the auto filter row that I have here. So back in our view here, we talked about auto filtering the rows and how up here you can just filter that information down. The next thing that we can do is we can sort this information. So I can, for example, click on the description column heading right here, and it sorts everything by the description. I can click the name, and you can see each time I do that, there's a little tick mark right here as it gives you an indication of which way it is sorting. And if that column is being sorted, I can click it again and it'll sort it in descending order. What I can also do is I can click on a column heading, I can hold down my Shift key and click again, and that will sort both columns. So you can see I'm sorting by the description and the name at the same time. So whatever's convenient for you in that aspect, you can click and hold and shift multiple columns to sort by description, by customer, by date. Another thing that we can do is we can do what's called grouping. So we see all this information here, and it's all lumped in with all of our 44,000 rows that we have here. what I can do is there's this little section right here, this little helper text that says drag a column here to group by that column. So let's say I have all this data, you know what, and I just want to group it by the type of product. So I'm going to get this type column right here. I'm just going to left click, I'm going to drag it right up here into this field, and I'm going to let go. And now you see it's grouped all my information by the different types of inventory that I have set in the system. And you can do that with any one of these different columns you have up here. For example, I'll pull this down and get rid of that and say let's group by customer name. So here's a list of the customers that I have in my demo database, and I've grouped all my sales by that, so I can then drill down even further from there and expand it and see what have I sold to CVS or what have I sold to Kroger, etc. Now you can take that a step further, and I can say, well, let's group by the customer and let's group by the type of product also. So as soon as I did that, I now see, okay, here's Kroger, and I want to expand that and see what I've done for the eggs, or I want to see what I've done for turkey meat. So very powerful different options in terms of what you want to do right there in grouping your data. Now, we also can see here if I have all this information here and I go, I see a bunch of different columns here that I don't care to see or I don't want, I can very easily get rid of it. For example, let's say I don't want this state column up here. I'm going to click on the state column, and I'm just going to drag it to the top of the screen, and you can see here it becomes a big X. And that means I can let go of my mouse, and now that state column has disappeared from that grid. So you can hide the data that you do not need. Now, we'll talk about how you add brand new columns to this that aren't already here when we actually go to writing a query. But when you're actually in view mode, if you have one user that needs to see that column and the next user that doesn't need it, add it, and then that user can customize what they see on this screen right here. Which that leads us to being able to save these different layouts. So for example here, I've created this grid view that has my by customer, by type, and I got rid of the state column. I can save these different layouts. And I'm going to give it a name, call it Keith's Demo, and hit OK. And I'm going to save it. So now, when I exit out of this grid view, I'm going to come back into it. Imagine it's a day later. I open it up, and you see here we're back to the default view. It doesn't have any of the grouping, and my state column is there. I'm just going to come right down here to this little option right here and find the one that says Keith's Demo. Click that, and now here's back to that view that we just created a second ago. So I can see the information here, I can expand by my customer, and I see that information, and you can see that my state column is gone. So the user can save their different options and their different views and how they like to see that data. So we've talked about how we can sort, we've talked about how we can filter the data and how we can group and remove columns. One of the things, and we talked about, if you got rid of a column accidentally, I've done it, I've clicked on the wrong column, gone up here to the extended price. There is a method that we can click this button right here, column list, and I can bring those columns back. So if I want to bring the state column back, I can. So there is a way to do that. I'm going to narrow my data down here just for the sake of limiting my data here and say only give me the customers that are the Food Lion customer here, for example. Now, I have this grid up on my screen, and you can see I have my 4,923 rows. Let's say I do want to print that. That's something I need to print out. You still can. I can come right up here. I can hit the print button. And after a second, it will display a screen here with that same exact information that's on that grid on your screen. Now, the process of printing that grid, the system, has to do its best guessing to figure out what columns are going to be shortened. You can see obviously this date field is a little thin here. It does its best to do it, so you can play back and forth. We can go over here and make the column a little bit bigger, for example, and if I hit the print button again, it should make that date field a little bigger. And so you can save that and rearrange that and make your columns in the order that you need to see them. Actually, which I skipped that process. I can get a column very easily. Let's say I want to see the state first. I can just drag the state column all the way here to the very beginning, and now my state column is first. If I go to print it, there it is printed with our state column at the very left, or one of the leftmost columns. It also kept the grouping to show our grouping of the name and then the type first. Okay. And you can go from there to email it, to send it, export it to a PDF, whatnot from there. In exporting, we can also come up here and hit the export button on this grid. I can hit the export button, and I'll call this demo 2, so I already have another file. I'm going to export this to an Excel file. I can either export to an Excel file, a CSV file, or a PDF file very easily here. So going to Excel, I'm just going to hit Save. It's going to export these 4,923 rows for me. So if I minimize this and just go to my desktop here, I see my Excel file. And there's my data. So very easily, I've been able to get information out of the system on the screen and put it into Excel that you can do whatever further analysis or manipulation of this that you want to. And there's all my data. And I won't do any training on Excel. So back into the item sales history, I think I covered most of the options here on this screen with that report. A couple other functions we can do with it. I'm going to run this invoice listing report. Some of the things that we can do on this, click OK on my options there. You can see we have a couple different things going on here. You can see, like, for example, the amount columns here all have dollar signs. Within a normal database, it doesn't store the dollar signs, but we want to format it. There's functions in here where we can change the formatting of this. You can see, like, this amount field here is down to 2 decimal places. One of the things we can do, and this is something we'll go over in more detail when we cover the Groovy Grid sections in a couple weeks. I can choose this display format editor, and I can say I want a currency value with 5 decimal places. And so now you can see if I close this out, now our column here has 5 decimal places. And so you can customize if you want decimal places or not. You can make your date fields, you know, show just the month and the year if you don't want the day in it. You can do all kinds of different formatting right by coming up here and doing this display format editor option. And once again, that's something we'll cover in more detail in a couple weeks. Another thing that we can do on this is you can see some of these lines are red. I set a conditional formatting that says if this value is greater than $10,000, display it in red. More of just an example, but you can create as many different conditional formattings as you want to. So same thing, I'm going to come right up here to the header and say conditions editor, and I can see here greater than equal to 10,000. I want it to be red. So I can easily change this, say I want this to be green, because that's a good thing, and I can close it and go from there. So you can save that configuration just as we did on the other layouts, and so that next time you load up the report, those cells are green. You can do functions also where, let's see, where did I go? That's not the one that I wanted. Where you want the entire row to be highlighted instead. So you can see the entire row, so now you can see that entire row back there is in green. I'm waiting for the first person that I call, and they've had like bright pink or something, and every customer has one of those users that has to do a report in bright pink. So that's a preview of some of that functionality there. What we can also do down here at the very bottom of this grid is we can sum up the data. So I can right-click on any one of these columns down here, and I can say I want a summary, I want a minimum, a maximum, a count, or an average of that data. So I've already had a summary, so I'm going to clear out that option right there. But I can right-click and just say sum up the data in that column, and it will. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so I can see it with my large number with my 5 decimal places. If I filter my data down up here, I'm just going to say, hey, let's just do Cisco. It will update the numbers accordingly. Okay. So I want to say in a specific division, once again, it is updating the numbers there too for me. Okay. So that's some of the power of the grids and that functionality there, the end user view. There's a whole bunch of more different options that we can do, but that's the high level beginnings of what we can do to start with Vision and the grids. So let me go into how you actually create the queries and give you a preview of how this works. Actually, one other thing before I go into that. One of the other things you can do on the grids is drill down functionality, for example. This is a report here is a list of the different invoices that I have for all my customers in this sample demo database. And what I've thought of, hey, what if I want to look at the details of this invoice? This is a header of the invoice. You say this was an invoice for $40,000. I want to look at the details. You can create drill downs and say, hey, whenever the user double clicks on the invoice number column, I want you to take me to another grid that shows me the details of that invoice. And so here's the details of that invoice. And so we can see, here were the line items on it. And look, it looks like I have a line here that says a conditional formatting that says if the price was 0, yell at me, because usually we don't want to give things away for free. So that is a drill down function that is available to you also. So I'm going to go into design mode. I'm going to hit this little edit button right here. Give me 1 second here. So this is the design mode. Within a query, what you're doing over here is we see a list of all the different entities. We see these are all the different pieces of data that we have available within the Aeros ERP database. And if you recall, our demo we're going to talk about is the Aeros ERP database over the next several weeks. But if you have a different database, say it's the Aeros Live database or a ComputerWay database or any other Access database or system you want, we can connect that up here so all the different data tables and pieces of data are available here. Just reach out to me if you have some of those, and I can work with you on how to set those up. So here's all the different pieces of data that we have within the Aeros ERP database, all kinds of information. If anything, the hardest part about writing a query against the Aeros ERP database is knowing where the data is and what it is you're actually looking for. For the most part, we've tried to make the system be as intuitive as possible by if you're looking for an invoice information, well, here's our invoices table. So I can go to my invoices table, and I can expand it out right here just by hitting this little plus sign. And here's the different pieces of data within that invoicing table. So I can see if I want to have a report that shows the customer PO number. So this report that I had already that we just saw a few minutes ago had these different columns. It had a due date, an invoice number, amount, balance amount, and division, et cetera, those different columns there. If I want to add to that my customer PO number, I can just hit this little checkbox right here and hit this option right here that says add this column. And now it's added that column to the list over here. So I can come here, I have the field. It says invoices customer number, but if I want it to be, or customer PO number, if I want it to be a little bit shorter, I can just click on it and type in PO number, so it's a little bit less text in my grid. Now if I run my query, and it's a little hard to see in design mode, especially with my screen resolution here, so I apologize, but if I expand this out and just drag this out of the way here, it looks like that same exact query view screen grid that we saw a few minutes ago. So here's that same information where the, the conditions were highlighted or the cells were red, but now we've added the PO number field. So now you can come up here and do all the same standard functions you want to and search by any one of the values in there. Give me all the PO numbers that start with 36 and, start drilling down from there into your data. Drag this guy back to where he needs to go here. So these are all the different columns, and so you can just pick and choose if you want invoices, do you want details from the invoices, do you want to get information from the customer? So we'll come up here to customers. If you wanted to display on each one of those, the country of that customer next to it, we can hit this little checkbox here and the city of that customer. Hit this little add columns button right down here. We add those columns, and that is available for you to see on the grid. So for those of you that are actually going to be in Vision designing reports and writing them, or reports or queries, this is where you expand the columns that are available to your users. Okay. And I'll just save that and go from there. So if I were to exit out of this, and I come back over here and run my invoice listing grid, now you see I have my PO number, city, and state column or country columns that I have right here that are available to you. Creating a new query is just a simple, I'm going to hit the new query button. It just comes up blank. So here's a blank screen with all my different fields over here. Let's say I wanted a list of all my vouchers. I can come over here to the vouchers table, expand it out. Say I want, you know, the bank account it was from, the comment on it, the status, the invoice number, invoice amount. I can pick and choose all the different columns. Hit the little Add Columns button. You can see right now we have 0 rows, but I'm going to run my query, and it'll pop up, and we have our 1,500 rows of our data right down here. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So you can see how easy it was just to get data out of the vouchers table. Now, it returned all 1,525 rows. Let's say you only want to see the vouchers that are open, haven't yet been paid. So what we can do here is we can say it's the status column is how we indicate whether a voucher has been paid or not. So I can come over here to the status column and say, I want to do this button right here that says Add Conditions. So I'm going to hit this little button right here that says Add Conditions. And instead of appearing right up here in terms of the different columns you want to return, this is the different criteria and the conditions you want to use to filter your data. So our voucher status is equal to, and I can click here and say I want O for open. Now if I run my query, I'm going to get only 139 records from there. So these options here can be expanded. You can have lookup lists. For example, let's say our vendor number. So I can click on it, and now I see a list of all my different vendors. This one's showing something. But so you can see that information there. I'm going to come back over to my invoice listing report, for example, and run this. And I want to run it by a specific customer. I'm going to say customers in list, and here's a list of all my customers. So instead of having to know what your customer number is or whatnot, you can easily come here, pick I want to run it just for this customer, this customer, this customer, hit the OK button, and it tells you that's the ones you have selected. I hit OK, and then it only limits my results to those specific customers. Once again, just as you saw when I was doing that new query, you can customize whatever those parameters are. We have a whole bunch of preset lookups here. For example, that vendor list is that lookup pop-up that comes up if you just need to see your vendor number and name. These are the different lookup lists that drive this option right here. So this customer short name, if I click on this right here and I see these different fields right here of city, sequence number, title, customer's high balance amount, say you don't like to see that when you're pulling that up, I can come over here to the customer list option. And here's that same exact data, okay? I can get rid of the country code, for example, and I can get rid of the high balance amount and save it. So now when I go and run that report again, or the grid, now when I choose I want to run by customer, you can see, oh, I must not have saved it. Epic demo fail. But it should save those options there so you can see what you like to see when you're filtering down your data. So that's a high-level overview of queries and what you can do with queries, and that's the basis of running everything else. Once you know that your invoice listing query, for example, is giving you all the data that it is you need to see, if you want to, actually create a printed report of 9,258 rows, great. You can stay just at this screen here, or we can narrow it down and create an actual printed report. So as we saw at the very beginning of today's session, we have the different reports that you can create. So under reports, here I see I've created a sample here. It says invoice listing by customer. If I run it, what it does is it gives me the same options that I did when I hit the invoice listing option over here, because its data source or its source of information to run this report is a query. So anytime I create a new report, the first thing it asks me is, what is your query that you're using to run this report? So it has all the same options here as that are over here on the left side. So you always start with your query first and then expand that out to actually creating a printed report if you need one. So let's come in here and I'll just do the item sales history report. I'll click OK. So there's a couple different things in this report designer that you can do. Actually, more than just a couple things. There's thousands of options in here, and it never fails that I'm learning something new every time that one customer gives me a requirement to do it. But in here, we have a basic layout of the report. It puts the name of that query just as your header up here and puts some basic fields down here in terms of printed date and time and the number of pages. There's two options you can do in order to get data onto this report. One of the options is to come over here to the field list screen, and I can go to the results option here, and I can see all those same different fields that we had. So all those dates, extended information, invoice number, price, etc. And I can just easily come over here and drag those fields onto the screen. Okay, so I can drag them on here. Then I can come over here and hit the print preview button. I hope I didn't just do this on the one. Yep, it's the one with 44,000 rows, so it's going to be a very, very long report. Actually, wouldn't hit the print button on this one. But so there, very quickly, I drag different fields on here, and I'm able to display them. You can do different options. We can come up here to add heading rows. So I want to add a label here. Drag that there. This is a really bad report. I don't know why you'd run a report with these 3 columns, but give it a name. I want to say this is the customer name column, and this is my invoice number column. I can click on these and tell the system I want to make those bold, and somebody will always do a pink on a report. Print preview, and there you go. You've created a very quick and dirty report in that aspect. Another thing we can do is we can do groupings. I can come right over here and add a group and say I want to group this report by the customer number, okay? And so it'll create a group. And instead of that being in the heading, I'm just going to drag this customer number field right over here. I'm going to drag this name field right up here. Let's make this a little smaller here, and print preview. And now you can see here's the item number and here's the customer name of Cisco. They have 1 million invoices in our sample database, so we probably won't be able to tell when we split it down to the next customer. But so you can do groupings. You can do as many levels of groupings as you want. If you wanted to group by customer, then by type of product, you can create more and more groups. I'll drag my type option down here and do more groupings. I'll do a print preview again. And by customer Cisco, by liquid eggs, and then your items you've sold and the invoice numbers they've been on from there. So very many options on the actual report side, and just this is really to what your imagination is and what your actual end reporting needs are and how you want to see it and how you want to group it. Once again, the basis of this was the queries that we started with. This is just putting the lipstick on the pig and saying, here's that grid, we want that grid to look a little bit nicer in an actual printed report. Now, another thing you can do, if you don't want to go through dragging and dropping all these different fields on, I'm just not going to save this report. I'm going to do a new report again here and do the item sales history again. One of the things we can do is we can go through a report wizard here and do this design and report wizard option. This design and report wizard option, we can go through all these different steps. I'm not going to talk about all these different things as I go through it, but we can add our different fields and invoice numbers and what fields we want to see, go through them, and it walks us through how do you want to group it. So I want to group it by customer number, then I want to group it by, let's just say by customer number, then my details there. So all that grouping and dragging and dropping of fields I did a few minutes ago, I can go through a wizard and say I want to sum the extended price on those. And how do I want this report to look? By clicking these different options here, I want it to be aligned left or stepped or outlined, you name it, whatever works for you. Landscape or portrait. Next, some basic look and style and feel would you like to do to it. Then we get to the very end, and what it will do for us is it created a very quick report with all those fields I wanted to on there, and now I can easily hit the print preview button, and there's my data formatted all nicely, grouped by my customer, by my invoice number, has my headings and all that kind of stuff. So you can then tweak it from there if you need to make modifications to it. So those are your two options in order to create an actual report based upon that query data. I can drag my different fields on using that field list that I showed you over here, or I can go through the wizard and have it help me and start a report from you there. You can do all kinds of different things with labels, and you can, if some of the data has pictures, you can add a picture or your company logo to that report. You can do a table if you need to print barcodes. If something here, the item number, you want to barcode that item number, you can do that. All kinds of different options on here to be able to lay out your report as you need. And running a report really is just as easy as hitting that blue play button as we saw. We hit the run report button. We choose our parameters or conditions as we saw with our queries, run it. The report viewer here is the same exact one that's in ERP, and our live product, the ribbon bar looks a little bit different, but you have the functions to email this report out. You can export this report to Excel or PDF if you need to there also, and your standard printing and options from there. We've got about 15 minutes left, so continuing along here, the dashboard functionality. So the dashboard in the end view results here, if I just come over here to this revenue analysis dashboard, it uses the same exact data that we had on one of those queries. I just said, hey, query, populate this dashboard right here. The options we have here I'll show you in design mode in terms of pies or graphs and grids and whatnot. It's just basic laying out those pieces of information. But with the actual run view of it, you can actually do a bunch of drill down functionality and filtering based upon the data. You can see right down here, like this little revenue chart here of these different years has this little filter guy right here. It says clear selection. I haven't done anything yet, so it's kind of grayed out. But what this allows me to do, right now, this report is showing me everything from 2010 to 2013 in my sales data. This revenue by type, quantity sold, and the sales by state. But I can come over here and click on this bar graph right here of 2012, and now it filters my data down. In 2012, these were the two different, my top categories. These were my quantity sold. This is my sales by state. In 2011, here's my data there. So in the dashboard view, in itself allows you to filter and narrow down your data accordingly. I'm going to close out of this one here. I'm going to do this other dashboard view here. This is just another sample grid that I created, dashboard that I created with data from the grid. Here's my different revenue by item. It looks like this item, brings in my most revenue over my time period. I don't have anywhere on here where I'm selecting a time period, but you can add options for that. Same thing, this one allows us to filter down. So if I want to click over here on, looks like by customer. So yeah, sales by customer by type. So I can click on this customer here, and it narrows it down. Okay, well, this data over here, revenue by item. What is my biggest selling item to Safeway? Actually, I chose poultry items, sorry. There, so I can see my largest poultry item. I can click over here and say, what's my largest market eggs item? And I can see my sales history over the time period there also, my top 5 products. So all kinds of different options there. Designing the dashboards is this little pencil guy right over here. In designing the dashboards, we have all kinds of different options right up here on terms of what different pieces of information you want. Do you want a gauge, a pie chart? I'm going to grab like the chart, for example. I'm just going to click this button right here, and you can see it put a chart option right there for me. I'm going to say I want a chart by item number and extended price. Let's do price there. So there's my items. Here's my highest priced items right here, so you can see all your different charts. You probably wouldn't look at a graph that way too much, but we can come up here to layout and style, and we can customize this chart even more. We can change it over to an area. We can change it to a bubble chart. All kinds of different options in how you want to actually display this chart here. Okay. So we have charting. You can add the grids. This is a pivot grid option right here. You have the charts. You have the pie charts. Different cards. You can add. Once again, you can add images, filters, and all that kind of stuff from there. You can see here. These are the different fields we have available, and these are the different queries. I only have the item sales history there, but if we want to say get another query onto this report, so we want to get the invoice listing query that we have. I want to add those pieces of data to this report. I want to create a new grid here, and I want to show the invoice data information. It will add that information to the grid. So any information you want to see on your dashboard, I can save and close it here. Next time I go in to run it, I've saved my dashboard so somebody can easily see, hey, here's a list of all your invoice numbers out there. And just like we saw with this option here to be able to filter this down, you can make it so that if you click this invoice number, it filters it. Or if, let's say this was a customer listing, you want to filter all your charts by that customer. You can do unlimited filtering and drill down details with that. The last function I want to show you here is the financial reporting. Within financial reporting, in this screen here, I only have one sample financial report to show you. As we go get ready to do some more training on the actual financial reports, I'll have more samples. But most of the financial reports I've developed have been for a specific customer, and I don't want to show you their financial statements because they probably would be really upset. So we have this function here. You can see this financial screen here looks very similar to the main screen back here where you can see your different queries, reports, and dashboards. It works kind of in a very similar concept. With financials, what you do when you're to run a financial report or create a financial report is you customize and create your lines. You create lines and you say, the lines on my financial report, come on, up here. The lines on my financial report, I want one line that says cash and one line that says accounts receivable, another line says egg inventory, and then supplies inventory, etc. Excuse me. And what you do is you configure what GL account appears or what selection of GL accounts comprise of that line. So for example, in your ERP GL account structure, you want to say, I want this line to show anything where segment 4 of my GL account number equals 1030. That's what you configure. This one, for example, says I want this line of my financial statement to be line or where segment 5 of my GL account number is 1010 or 1020. So you can create all kinds of different configuration options, and it's just really configuring what each line of your of your financial statement is. The next thing you do is configure your different columns. So kind of the same way, we can come in here and say, I want a financial report where each column is my 12-month trend of history. So I want to see January all the way down to December. So you just configure what each one of those months is. You have options over here to configure what period number that is that data stores, different filtering and options with that. And I apologize for rushing through. This is a great, powerful feature, but to keep us on schedule, I talked too much about queries. So to run this, I can easily come over here, choose what company and division I want to run it for. I want to run it for both of them. I tell it what accounting period I want to run it for. And I hit the Run button, and after a second here, we can see we have our data where it brought in those details with the GL accounts that I had selected on my line configuration, and now here's my financial report. Now I can copy this to my clipboard. If I want to do something to Excel, I can export it to Excel. I can email it off, or I can hit the print button, and it will try to print it as much as possible. Printing, this is a new feature that I'm experimenting with, so It is kind of funky when you have a lot of data on your grids on how to do that, but you can email it, you can export it. I have some customers that will export it to Excel and then use Excel to deal with the weird funky printing of multiple columns and whatnot right now. All kinds of different options to be able to configure your lines and columns on how to do that. So this is the different line groupings that you can do, and these are your different column groupings. When you're running a financial report, you can mix and match all kinds of different combos. Like I said, I only have this one line combination right here, so I can only see that one. I can see the different column combinations, so if I go, I just want to see those same lines, but for just different columns. I'll do it for a run period, and it shows me just that data for a run period. You can customize these options here too. And you want to say that the current period and the year-to-date information. So you can, once again, make those different reports, those different financial reports on how you like to see it. Limitless capabilities there, month-to-date, year-to-date, you name it. This one is doing a budget comparison. So get our current period, get the budget for that period, and show me the difference and whatnot from there. So that's an overview of the financials aspect. We've covered today how to go over queries, what a query is and how to write a query roughly, and what a report is and how to write those reports, and dashboards. So that's the gist of my presentation for today. That gives you the high-level overview. As we talked about previously, I will be digging in on our next session, really just on this one section right here of how to create queries. We'll create this basic invoice listing query, actually adding columns, checking the boxes, adding conditions and filters so that you can filter your data down to make it more appropriate to what you're looking for at that time. If you haven't, I'm going to come up here and look and see if there's any questions for me. If you haven't, go right ahead and hit the little chat button and let me know if you have any questions or whatnot, and I will be able to see it here. And if you don't have any questions and you're ready to go, you're more than welcome to hang up. Let's see here. Doesn't look like I have any questions there. Come on, thing. I'm not seeing any, so if anybody has any and I'm just not getting them at all, I will bring up this presentation back here so you can see my email address. And you can either shoot me a phone call or shoot me an email. I will be more than happy to answer any questions. I'll stay on the line for the next couple of minutes. If anyone has any questions, just type in that little box up there and I will go from there. Otherwise, thanks everybody for your time today, and we'll be in touch. Okay, with that said, I will end the meeting. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.